Rapture, the abomination that causes desolation, is perhaps the single most important earthly event during end times, because Jesus specifically mentioned it when speaking to his disciples. In other words, the abomination is the event that Jesus specifically said to watch for at the time of his return, in the sky, or rapture of Christians. He added two examples to illustrate the immediate urgency when the abomination is set up in the holy place, Jerusalem. Matthew 24:14-16, 21. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. Prior to this passage, Jesus gives several signs that are vaguer, but then addresses the abomination from the book of Daniel as the final sign before the rapture that will bring the greatest distress upon the world, even more so than Armageddon, which is roughly 2,300 days, 78 months, after the rapture. Daniel 8:13-14. The 2,300 days between the rapture and Armageddon is commonly called the tribulation, which will consist of the trumpet and bowl plagues in Revelation, not the seals. People mistakenly include the seals in the tribulation, but that is wrong because seals 1-5 are in the past, and seal 6 is the rapture, since the signs in the sun, moon, and stars perfectly match the rapture, gathering in the sky, in Matthew 24:29-31. In addition to the same exact signs, the sixth seal is obviously the rapture because it describes people hiding in the mountains, who fled, who see Jesus, the Lamb, in the sky, Rev 6:15-17. After that, the multitude from every nation, Christians, are seen arriving in heaven, in Rev 7:9. Since palm branches symbolize arrival, they are in heaven between the sixth and seventh seals, which proves the pre-trib rapture because the trumpet plagues, etc., can't start until the seventh seal is over. A half hour of silence in Rev 8. Since trumpets literally can't sound during a silence, post-tribulationists tried to deceive people into believing that the tribulation, including the Antichrist, Rev 13, comes before the rapture, multitude in heaven, by overlapping the seals, trumpets, and bowls, which is manipulating or omitting about half of God's end-time prophecy. However, omitting any part of Revelation is expressly forbidden, Rev 22:19, which essentially makes them false prophets, for changing God's prophecy. The section in Matthew 24:22-25, which talks about the tribulation, is talking about the 144,000 Israelites, Rev 7, who stay on earth during the trumpet plagues. They are not deceived into taking the mark of the beast, so their days are cut short because they're martyred before the bowl plagues, Rev 14. All of the tribulation or distress starts when the abomination is set up, fleeing to the mountains, but the rapture of Christians, Matt 24:29-31, also happens at the same time because there are two groups in Matthew 24:15-31, 144,000 Israelites and Christians, just as there are two groups in Revelation 7. The two accounts of end times, Matt and Rev, must match, and omitting one group from Rev 7 would be another violation of God's warning in Rev 22:19. Therefore, the abomination is the last sign before the rapture, Jesus' return in the sky to gather Christians, which is why it's the single most important earthly event. During end times, Jesus just left things a little vague. In Matthew, speaking to his disciples, because he knew Revelation would be given later, with more details, he also pointed to the book of Daniel, where Daniel 11 contains a detailed list of events surrounding the abomination, but the meaning was sealed until the time of the end. 12:4. In fact, the abomination is mentioned 4 times in Daniel's visions, all of which give different information, and when combined, they form a definitive timeline of end times. As such, Daniel's 70th 7, Daniel 9:27, cannot be the same as tribulation, as most people have been led to believe, because the abomination is in the middle of the 7, but it starts a 2,300-day period in Daniel 8:13-14. In other words, the 70th 7 and the 2,300 days overlap, but they can't be the same because it's literally impossible. Simply put, the rapture happens at the abomination, which is in the middle of the 70th 7, which starts the 2,300-day tribulation, ending with Armageddon. After that, Jesus reigns on earth for 1,000 years anyway. The most detailed list of events surrounding the abomination is found in Daniel 11, called God's Book of Truth by the angel, Dan 10:21. Daniel 11 is the only chapter in the Bible that was specifically sealed until the time of the end. Yet, God never said it would be sealed forever. In fact, God likes to reveal the future before it happens because that's his way of showing power and superiority over worthless idol gods. Isaiah 44:6-7. Therefore, it's no surprise that God has allowed someone like me, lowly and unimportant, to unseal Daniel 11, so no one can boast. 1 Cor 1:25-29. Previous interpretations had huge gaps and serious flaws, but the correct interpretation of Daniel 11 includes every empire, from Daniel's time until now, with no gaps or omissions. Plus, unlike previous interpretations, the events or verses get closer together as time goes by, especially during end times, or the final empire, which is what you would expect from a chapter that was sealed until the time of the end. The list below summarizes the events in this century and shows how they got closer together. Summary: Daniel 11:19. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. 1919. World War I. End of the Ottoman Empire's reign in the Middle East. Daniel 11:20. There shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger, nor in battle. 919-1948. British mandate governed while oil became valuable and Israel was established. Daniel 11:21. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. 1979. Islamic Revolution in Iran re-established the Shiites as a regional power. Daniel 11:22. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the Prince of the Covenant. 2003. U.S. defeated Saddam Hussein, Iran's closest enemy. Daniel 11:22. 2011. U.S. pulled all troops out of Iraq, as directed by an earlier deal. Daniel 11:22. September 2013. U.S. did not fire missiles at Assad but opted to let Russia dismantle chemical weapons instead. Daniel 11:23. And after the league made with him he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up, and shall become strong with a small people. November 2013. Interim nuclear deal, a historic agreement, was signed with Iran. Daniel 11:24. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. June 2014. ISIS invaded northern Iraq and declared a caliphate. Daniel 11:25. and he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. March 2015. Saudi Arabia declared war on Yemen because they said Iran was involved, and the Houthis were winning the civil war. Daniel 11:26. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overthrow, and many shall fall down slain. July 2016. Attempted coup in Turkey turned Erdogan away from Saudi Arabia and more towards Russia, Iran, and Assad. Daniel 11:27. And both of these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. September 2016. G20 Summit. Despite accusations, Erdogan still sat with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, from Saudi Arabia. Daniel 11:28. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the Holy Covenant, and he shall do exploits, and return to his own land. September 2016. UN General Assembly. Rouhani complained to the P5+1 that America wasn't holding up their end of the nuclear deal, which got much of Iran's frozen wealth returned. Daniel 11:29. At the time appointed he shall return, and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. September 2016. Houthis began a new offensive into southern Saudi Arabia. Daniel 11:30. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the Holy Covenant. So shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. October 2016. U.S. Navy fired 3 missiles and destroyed Houthi radar sites on the Red Sea coast. After that, the Houthis lost ground and even pursued a peace settlement for a while, but the Saudis wouldn't compromise. Daniel 11:30. December 2016 present. The UN approved Resolution 2334, which condemned Israeli settlements and demanded that all buildings stop on the same day. The UN funded a blacklist to aid the BDS boycott in December 2017. The UN voted 128-9 to condemn Trump's declaration that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, thus forsaking the Holy Covenant. Notice that all the verses before the abomination in verse 31 have been fulfilled. So the abomination is due next. It would seem that God is taking his time, or creating a small gap, but the current riots in Gaza, detailed below, started in 2017, after the embassy move to Jerusalem was announced. That was about the same time as the above UN vote, so I could argue that there is no gap at all. On the other hand, the parable of the 10 virgins says that the bridegroom was a long time in coming. Matt 25:5. So a delay is expected. Plus, Peter said, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. 2 Peter 3:9. Yet, God will not wait forever, it will happen eventually, just like all of God's other prophecies. 2017. Daniel 11:31. The abomination. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. First of all, I don't think Israel has to reinstate animal sacrifices for this verse to take place. I think the daily sacrifice is the daily prayer at the Western Wall, which is also the temple fortress. It makes sense because a fortress implies a wall and the Jews pray to that wall daily. If an armed uprising could desecrate the Western Wall, then it would naturally stop the prayer, at least for a short time, until they could clean the desecration. However, that would be hard to do during an armed uprising. Thus, Everything in the first sentence could happen very fast, and while that is happening, they could also set up the abomination. No one knows what the abomination is, including me. In fact, if anyone says they know, then they're just guessing, because the Bible doesn't say by definition. It is something hated by God. We know that it is something that can be set up, and the location is the holy place, Matt 24:15, or a wing of the temple, Daniel 9:27. It could be something unusual, but my best guess is simply a flag, since that can be set up very quickly, and it can be very symbolic. I mean, God allowed Israel to miraculously reunite Jerusalem and take the Temple Mount in just 6 days, in 1967. So a flag to symbolize the splitting of Jerusalem would certainly be hated by God. In recent months, there have even been a couple of attempts to raise a Palestinian flag on the Temple Mount during protests, but they were quickly removed by Israeli police. Yet, it might be different during an armed uprising, and raising a flag is common practice to symbolize victory. Yet, that victory will be short-lived, because God will step in and the rapture will happen, events of which will cause desolation. I think part of the desolation will be caused by the sixth seal earthquake, which will generate a tsunami, which is why Judea is told to flee to the mountains when the abomination is set up. The tsunami is described in Luke 21:25, below. Luke 21:25-27. There will be signs in the sun, moon and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Men will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At the time they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. The signs in the sun, moon, and stars are described in more detail in Matthew 24:29. Which match perfectly with the sixth seal, in Rev 6, where people are hiding in the mountains who see the Lamb in all his glory. Of course, there's an earthquake in the sixth seal, in addition to the signs, so the tossing of the sea and running for the mountains makes perfect sense. Even though Israel has tsunami warning signs for evacuation, the time will be short, as Jesus indicated. So not everyone will make it and there will be desolation. Significant current events. Jesus also said, "When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Luke 21:20-21. That is obviously the same desolation that is caused by the abomination, because people are directed to flee to the mountains. So, the armies surrounding Jerusalem must have something to do with the armed forces rising up in Daniel 11:31. Yet, I don't think armies will be surrounding Jerusalem, like a siege, but rather it's talking about the increase of hostilities all around Israel, with Jerusalem being the focal point of discussion. I mean, Iran has been getting closer in Syria, while Hezbollah is getting stronger in Lebanon, while Hamas is causing trouble in Gaza, and other violence regularly happens in the West Bank. Much of the hostility is centered around a future state for the Palestinians, who insist on having East Jerusalem as their capital, but that will never happen. December 6, 2017. Things began to get more heated when Trump announced that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel and America would move their embassy there. Rioting began the very next day, and has continued, at least once a week, ever since. March 30, 2018, the protests entered a new phase called the March of Return riots, where Palestinians gather at several points on the Gaza border. Each Friday, they were supposed to last until May 14, 2018, which was when America officially moved their embassy to Jerusalem, on the 70th anniversary of Israel. But the protests are still ongoing. May 14th was the bloodiest day, with over 60 deaths, but hundreds have been killed overall. May 8, 2018, Trump officially pulled America out of the nuclear deal between Iran and the P5+1. and started reimposing sanctions, even though Iran was abiding by the nuclear agreement. The sanctions are even tougher than before and have since wrecked Iran's economy. April 8, 2019, Trump even declared the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, a terrorist group, which is unprecedented because that is a major branch of Iran's military. The move increases sanctions because the IRGC is involved in many businesses in Iran, so other countries are now prohibited to do business with those companies. May 2, 2019, Trump also removed the exemptions from Iran's biggest oil customers, so they must look for oil elsewhere, or face sanctions. March 25, 2019, Trump announced that America was recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel, further angering Syria and Lebanon, and Muslims in general. April 6, 2019, Netanyahu pledged to annex all the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, if he was re-elected, which of course he was. 3 days later in general, the election resulted in an increase of right-wing and religious seats in the Knesset. Palestinian officials reacted strongly to the results, pointing out that only 18 of 120 members support a two-state solution. They called the election a vote for endless occupation and apartheid. 1. War between the US and Iran. The tension between Iran and the United States has grown considerably in May and June. It was announced on Sunday, May 5, that the carrier group, USS Lincoln, was moving towards the Gulf, due to credible threats from Iran, even though it was revealed later that the move had been planned before. Notice that the credible threats were around the same time as the above escalation in Gaza. Then, on Friday, May 10, it was announced that the USS Arlington, an amphibious landing ship, as well as a Patriot missile battery and B-52 bombers, were on their way. In the meantime, on May 8, Trump imposed sanctions on Iran's industrial metals, such as iron, steel, aluminum, and copper, which is 10% of Iran's export economy, second only to oil. The economic warfare and threats of physical warfare finally backed Iran into a corner where they had no choice but to lash out. The lashing out started on Sunday, May 12, when 4 oil tankers were sabotaged in the Gulf of Oman, just south of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran denied that it was them, but what do you expect them to say? On Tuesday, May 14, there was a sophisticated drone attack on a Saudi oil pipeline, west of the capital, Riyadh, about 500 miles north of Yemen. On Sunday, May 19, a Katyusha rocket landed in the Iraqi Green Zone, where the U.S. Embassy is located. A launcher was found about 5 kilometers away, and Shia militias, backed by Iran, are the main suspects. Trump's response, later on Sunday, was a strongly worded tweet, saying, "If Iran wants to fight, that will be the official end of Iran. Never threaten the US again." However, threats and intimidation are apparently not going to work with Iran and their allies. On June 6, an MQ-9 Reaper drone from the US was taken down over the Red Sea by the Houthis. On June 12, the Houthis hit the arrivals hall at Saudi Arabia's Abha airport, wounding 26 people. Only 8 went to the hospital. But it's another example that the Houthis are getting access to more sophisticated weapons. On Thursday morning, June 13, 2 tankers experienced explosions in the Strait of Hormuz, either from mines or torpedoes. It was just an odd time for the attacks to happen because Japanese Prime Minister, Abe, was visiting Iranian Supreme Leader, Khamenei, and both ships, which were Japanese and Norwegian, were said to be carrying Japanese materials. It was odd because Khamenei accepted the meeting, which he wasn't obligated to do, and told Abe that he wasn't interested in a message from Trump, which was sufficient to express his dissatisfaction. So why was an attack on a Japanese tanker necessary? Of course, Iran claims that they were being framed, which is possible, but given the fact that Iran is the current king of the North, in Daniel 11, and verse 31 indicates that someone's armed forces will rise up. I think the IRGC was likely responsible. If so, then Khamenei wanted to send Trump a definite message, beyond just his verbal dissatisfaction. On June 18, a Katyusha rocket was fired across the Tigris River into an Iraqi military base where Americans are present, yet there was no injuries or casualties. On June 19, another Katyusha rocket was fired near Basra, Iraq, into a site that houses several major oil firms, including US ExxonMobil, injuring 3 people. On June 20, Iran shot down an RQ-4A Global Hawk drone over the Strait of Hormuz. The drone reportedly cost over $100 million. Iran claims that it was in their airspace and the US disputes that claim. The discrepancy is about 10 miles difference. Nevertheless, the dispute almost caused a war because Trump had a plan in motion where an estimated 150 Iranians would have been killed, but he cancelled the strike with 10 minutes to spare. On June 24, Trump imposed further sanctions upon Supreme Leader Khamenei, and later upon Foreign Minister Zarif, for which President Rouhani said the White House was suffering from a mental disability. Of course, that angered Trump, who fired back a tweet and said, "Any attack by Iran on anything American will be met with great and overwhelming force. In some areas, overwhelming will mean obliteration." Therefore, Trump has drawn his own red line that Iran will eventually cross. It's just a matter of time. Granted, Iran has been attacked repeatedly in Syria and has yet to retaliate, but if Iran is attacked directly, I think they will fight back. In that case, Iran has already said that they will use their allies such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad. Netanyahu has also said that Israel will join the war. Therefore, it is feasible to think that if the US attacks Iran, some of Iran's allies will attack Israel, which could be the armed uprising in Daniel 11:31, which will result in the abomination and rapture. On Monday, July 1, Israel once again attacked Iran's allies in Syria, killing 15 people, including 6 civilians, one of whom was an infant. The strikes were mainly around Homs and Damascus. Several Hezbollah members were among the 9 soldiers killed. On Thursday, July 4, British Marines seized an Iranian oil tanker as it was entering the Mediterranean Sea, south of Gibraltar. It was believed to be destined for Syria. An Iranian official tweeted that it would be their duty to seize a British tanker, which they did on July 19. The 31st of August 2019. Escalation in Gaza. In the week following Passover, tensions escalated dramatically, starting on Tuesday, when one rocket was fired into the Mediterranean, prompting Israel to reduce the area that Palestinians can fish. On Thursday, May 2, hundreds of balloons with explosive or incendiary devices were launched into Israel, which prompted Israel to retaliate with missiles, which led to 4 more rockets from Gaza. Friday brought the usual riots on the Gaza border, but 2 Israelis were shot, which prompted more retaliation. By Saturday and Sunday, May 5, over 600 rockets had been fired into Israel in a 24-hour period, killing 4 Israelis. Of course, Israel retaliated by bombing over 260 targets, killing at least 16 Palestinians. By the way, May 2 was also the day that Trump ended exemptions for Iran's biggest oil customers. The timing could be a coincidence or it could be linked because Islamic Jihad and Hamas are allies of Iran. May 15, 2019, there was a 4.6 earthquake in the Mediterranean, the perfect location to hit Tel Aviv with a tsunami. But of course it didn't. However, larger earthquakes are often preceded by smaller ones. When the time comes, the earthquake of the 6th seal will be enormous and generate a considerable wave, as indicated by Luke 21:25-26. Riots near Bab al-Rama and the Golden Gate. There's a second factor that could have a direct or indirect relationship to the uprising. February 18, 2019, a new development began to take place when members of the Waqf a board of trustees who decide on matters concerning the Temple Mount, started demanding that the Golden Gate, on the east side of the Temple Mount, which leads to the Bab al-Rama, be opened. The Bab al-Rama is a building with columns, just inside the gate, which the Muslims would like to make into a permanent mosque. However, Netanyahu and the Israeli courts have said no. In fact, the gate has been locked since 2003, due to Muslims conducting illegal excavations and Hamas being suspected of using the building for terrorist activities. Yet, the gate was opened on Friday, February 22, 2019, after 4 days of rioting and threats of more riots. The reason this could be a catalyst for the abomination is that Israeli courts have issued a court order to close the gate. The reason they want it closed so bad is that Jews think their Messiah is supposed to enter through the gate, the one facing east, and it is supposed to remain shut until he arrives.
Ezekiel 44, 1-3.
Then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. The Lord said to me, "This gate is to remain shut. It must not be opened. No one may enter through it. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. 3. The prince himself is the only one who may sit inside the gateway to eat in the presence of the Lord. He is to enter by way of the portico of the gateway and go out the same way." Note, the passage is a little confusing because Ezekiel lived hundreds of years before Jesus, yet, he seems to be prophesying about modern times today, when the gate is shut, but he says that the Lord entered through it, past tense, since that's where Jesus made his triumphant entry. I don't fully understand everything, but the Bab al-Rama fits the description of a portico, roof and columns, and it's the only gate facing east, towards the Mount of Olives. Of course, the Jews are wrong about their Messiah, but that doesn't matter because they are still highly motivated to re-shut the gate, so their Messiah can arrive. Of course, the Muslims know this, which is why they want it open, to prevent the Jewish Messiah from arriving. That is the same reason that the Sultan Suleiman put a large Muslim cemetery in front of the gate. In the 16th century plus, the Palestinians suspect Israel of wanting to change the status quo and put a synagogue for Jewish prayer in the area. The Muslims have vowed to riot if Israel relocks the gate, but the Jews are bound to do it, eventually, because many think the time is right for their Messiah. The situation could ignite into a religious war, and the Bab al-Rama is literally on a wing of the temple, where the abomination will be set up. Below, the 70th 7, Daniel 9:27, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1:7. In the middle of the 7 he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. First of all, the subject of this verse is Iran, not Israel as many people have been led to believe, since the one who confirms a covenant with many is the same one who sets up the abomination. Then, the end that is decreed is poured out on him, which is the tribulation, trumpet and bowl plagues in Revelation, which is poured out upon the Antichrist and armies of the beast. Note, the way I understand it, the beast is a group of 10 nations that will make up the north, in Daniel 11, but Iran will lead those nations as the king of the north, who will ultimately be led by the Antichrist, who is a person, the mouth in Rev 13:5. In general, Revelation can be confusing because beast can refer to the nations or armies, or the Antichrist who is leading the armies, but Iran is in the center. Along those lines, I'm almost certain that the covenant with many was the JCPOA or Iranian nuclear agreement with the P5+1, US, UK, France, Russia, China, plus Germany, which makes up the many. The confirmation most likely came on implementation day, January 16, 2016. Which is when Iran completed its requirements for the agreement, and in return, some of the sanctions were lifted. If 3.5 years are added, then that would put the approximate middle of the 70th 7 near July 16, 2019. Of course, that date passed and the abomination and rapture didn't occur, but like I've always said, the middle of a 7-year period cannot be pinpointed to just one day. On the contrary, the approximate middle could be several months, so I have not given up that the Iranian nuclear agreement was the covenant with many. Besides, the parable of the 10 virgins says that the bridegroom was a long time in coming. Matt 25:5. So you would not expect Jesus to come on the exact middle.